The morning shift at Riverside Cafe started like any other Tuesday. Sarah Martinez tied her apron strings with practiced efficiency, her fingers moving automatically through the familiar motion she'd performed. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Countless times over the past 3 years. At 24, she had learned to find dignity in honest work, even when others couldn't see past the uniform. The cafe wasn't glamorous, but it paid her tuition at community college where she studied nursing at night. Every tip, every smile from a grateful customer brought her one step closer to her dream of helping people heal. The lunch rush began promptly at noon. Sarah moved between tables with grace, born of experience, balancing plates, refilling coffee cups, and offering warm smiles to regulars and newcomers alike. She had developed an instinct for reading people, knowing who wanted conversation and who preferred to be left alone with their thoughts. This skill served her well, turning occasional customers into loyal patrons who requested her section specifically. But today, that instinct would be tested in ways she never imagined. The couple arrived at 1:15, their expensive clothes and haughty expressions immediately setting them apart from the usual crowd. The man wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent, while the woman dripped with jewelry that caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows. They chose a table near the center of the dining area, their voices already raised in complaint about the wait despite arriving without a reservation during peak hours. Sarah approached with her notepad ready and her professional smile firmly in place, determined to provide excellent service regardless of their attitude. From the moment she greeted them, nothing was good enough. The water wasn't cold enough. The menu was too limited. The specials weren't appealing. Sarah absorbed each criticism with patient understanding, offering alternatives and doing her best to accommodate their requests. She brought fresh ice water, explained the chef's recommendations, and ensured their orders were prioritized in the kitchen. But their hostility only escalated. The woman snapped her fingers to get Sarah's attention, treating her like a servant rather than a fellow human being. The man spoke to her without making eye contact, as if acknowledging her humanity would somehow diminish his own importance. When Sarah delivered their meals, carefully prepared and beautifully presented, the woman's face twisted with disgust. Without tasting a single bite, she declared the food unacceptable. Her voice rose, filling the cafe with complaints about temperature, seasoning, and presentation. Other diners turned to watch, conversations falling silent as the scene unfolded. Sarah maintained her composure, apologizing and offering to have the kitchen prepare something else. But the woman wasn't interested in solutions. She was interested in creating a spectacle, and Sarah had become her unwilling co-star in a drama nobody asked to witness. The situation deteriorated rapidly. The man joined his companion's tirade, his voice booming across the restaurant as he questioned Sarah's competence, her intelligence, and her worth. He demanded to see the manager, then changed his mind and directed his venom solely at Sarah, as if she personally offended him by existing. The words cut deep, each insult designed to humiliate and degrade. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with shame, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to remain professional. She had dealt with difficult customers before, but this felt different. This felt personal, cruel, and deliberately destructive. Then the woman stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. In one swift motion, she grabbed her water glass and threw the contents directly into Sarah's face. The cold liquid shocked Sarah's system, running down her hair and soaking the front of her uniform. Gasps echoed throughout the cafe, but nobody moved. The woman wasn't finished. She began shoving Sarah backward, her hands pushing against Sarah's shoulders with surprising force. Sarah stumbled, trying to maintain her balance while water dripped from her chin. The physical assault seemed to break something fundamental in the room's atmosphere, yet still nobody intervened. The cafe's other patrons sat frozen, witnesses to injustice but paralyzed by their own discomfort. Some looked away, suddenly fascinated by their plates. Others watched with wide eyes, but remained seated, perhaps reasoning that it wasn't their place to get involved, perhaps afraid of becoming targets themselves. The cafe manager stood behind the counter, phone in hand, clearly calling someone, but moving too slowly to stop what was happening. Sarah stood alone in her humiliation, surrounded by people who chose silence over solidarity. The isolation felt worse than the water, worse than the shoves, worse than the cruel words that continued to pour from the couple's mouths. Just as the man raised his hand, his face contorted with rage, the cafe door opened. An elderly man entered, his white hair neatly combed, his posture still proud despite his obvious age. He wore a simple button-down shirt and slacks. Nothing remarkable about his appearance, except for the military pin on his collar and the quiet authority in his bearing. He took in the scene with a single sweeping glance, his experienced eyes immediately understanding the dynamics at play. Without hesitation, he walked directly toward the confrontation, his footsteps steady and purposeful against the tiled floor. The stranger positioned himself between Sarah and her attackers, his presence creating an instant barrier. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make threats, didn't even appear angry. Instead, he spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had faced far worse than bullies in expensive clothing. He addressed the couple with the kind of quiet authority that demanded attention, asking them a simple question that cut through all their bluster and rage. He asked if they would treat their own daughter, their own mother, their own sister this way. He asked if humiliating someone trying to earn an honest living made them feel powerful or just revealed their own poverty of character. The man in the suit blustered, attempting to redirect his anger toward this new target, but something in the stranger's eyes made him hesitate. The elderly man continued, his words measured and precise. He spoke about dignity, about the fundamental respect every human being deserves, regardless of their occupation or social status. He mentioned his own years of service, the people he'd known who worked multiple jobs to support their families, the quiet heroes who showed up every day without recognition or applause. His voice never rose above conversational volume, yet every word landed with the weight of absolute conviction. Something shifted in the cafe. The spell of inaction broke. A woman at a nearby table stood and walked to Sarah's side, offering her napkins to dry her face and hair. A businessman pulled out his phone, making it clear he was recording the couple's behavior for potential legal action. The manager finally emerged from behind the counter, his earlier paralysis replaced with decisive action as he informed the couple they needed to leave immediately. Other customers began voicing their support for Sarah, their earlier silence transformed into solidarity, now that someone had shown them the way forward. The couple's bravado crumbled under the weight of collective disapproval. Faced with unified opposition rather than isolated vulnerability, they retreated. The woman grabbed her designer purse, muttering justifications that nobody believed. The man threw cash on the table with exaggerated disdain, trying to salvage his dignity through a show of wealth that impressed nobody. They left the cafe under the watchful eyes of every patron, their expensive clothes and jewelry unable to mask the smallness of their spirits. The door closed behind them, and the tension drained from the room like air from a punctured balloon. The elderly stranger turned to Sarah with gentle concern, asking if she was all right. His kindness, coming after such cruelty, nearly broke through her carefully maintained composure. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and he patted her shoulder with grandfatherly affection. He told her that how people treat service workers reveals everything about their character, and that her grace under pressure demonstrated a strength many people never develop. He said she would be an excellent nurse, that the compassion and patience she showed even to those who didn't deserve it would serve her patients well. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of gratitude rather than humiliation. The cafe erupted in applause. Customers who had sat silent during her ordeal now stood to acknowledge her dignity and the stranger's courage. Tips appeared on tables, far more generous than usual, accompanied by notes of apology and encouragement. Regulars approached to offer words of support, expressing shame at their earlier inaction and admiration for her professionalism. The manager apologized profusely, promising that such behavior would never be tolerated again, that staff safety and dignity would be prioritized above customer appeasement. The afternoon transformed from Sarah's darkest professional moment into an unexpected affirmation of human decency. The elderly man stayed for coffee, refusing Sarah's attempts to comp his order. They talked briefly during her break, and she learned he was a retired teacher who had spent 40 years working with underprivileged students. He understood what it meant to be undervalued, to have your worth questioned by people who should know better. He told her that standing up to bullies never gets easier, but it always matters, because silence gives cruelty permission to flourish. Sarah thanked him with genuine emotion, and he simply smiled, saying he had only done what anyone should do, what everyone in that cafe should have done from the beginning. As Sarah's shift ended, she reflected on the day's events. The cruelty had been real, the humiliation profound, but so had the redemption. One person's courage had catalyzed change, transforming bystanders into allies and shame into strength. She realized that while she couldn't control how others treated her, she could control how she responded, maintaining her dignity even when others tried to strip it away. The experience would stay with her, not as a trauma to overcome, but as a reminder that kindness and courage can emerge even in the darkest moments, and that standing up for what's right can create ripples that extend far beyond the immediate situation. That evening, Sarah posted about her experience on social media, not to shame the couple, but to thank the stranger and encourage others to intervene when they witness injustice. Her post went viral, shared thousands of times by people who recognized their own failures to act in similar situations. The elderly man was identified and honored by local news, though he insisted he was no hero, just a decent person doing what decency required. The cafe implemented new policies to protect staff from abusive customers, and many other businesses followed suit, inspired by Sarah's story. Months later, Sarah passed her nursing exams with honors. On graduation day, she wore a small pin beneath her gown, a gift from the stranger who had defended her. It was a simple thing, just a silver pin engraved with a single word: kindness. She wore it as a reminder that the world contains both cruelty and compassion, that silence in the face of injustice makes us complicit, and that one person's courage can change everything. She promised herself that she would be that person when needed, standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves, breaking the freeze that so often grips good people when confronted with wrongdoing. Thank you so much for watching this story on Kindness True Stories. If this touched your heart, please like this video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories of courage, compassion, and the power of human kindness. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our inspiring true stories. Together we can spread kindness and remind the world that one person's courage can make all the difference. See you in the next story.